Hey guys, tonight we step back in time to a place you might have stumbled into on a long, muddy road centuries ago, the medieval inn. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and damp wool. The door creaks like it's been keeping travelers' secrets for generations. And let's be honest, if you actually found yourself here in the 14th century, you probably wouldn't survive the night without a fever, a dagger in the ribs, or at least a suspicious stomach ache from the ale. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you are and what time it is right now. I love seeing our little bedtime history map light up across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The road is long, your boots are heavy with a day's worth of mud, and your breath blooms in the cold evening air. Ahead, a lantern sways faintly in the wind, its yellow glow struggling against the thick blue shadows of dusk. The sign above it, worn painted long ago with a leaping stag, marks the place you've been searching for, a humble inn, the kind found on a trade road, halfway between somewhere important and somewhere else just as forgettable. You push through the low doorway, ducking instinctively. The lintel is carved, roughly initials and small symbols scratched into it by hands long gone. Inside, you are met first by heat, the kind of heat that comes from a great open hearth that has burned since morning, and then by the mingled scents of stew, spilled beer, singed wool, and smoke from the peat fire. It's not clean exactly, but it's the sort of dirt that belongs here, like the patina on a much-handled cup. A few heads turn your way, mostly curious, a couple suspicious. The inn's common room is lit by tallow candles set in iron holders along the walls, their small flames trembling as people shift on benches. The wooden floor is uneven boards, warped and darkened by years of boots and spills. A long trestle table stretches across one side of the room, already crowded with merchants, wagoners, and a pair of traveling minstrels whose lutes lean against the wall behind them. To your right, a serving woman in a patched kirtle sweeps past, balancing 3 wooden trenchers stacked with bread and a steaming pottage. She slides them onto the table with practiced efficiency, her hands quick, her eyes sharper still. A man in a broad-brimmed felt hat raises his mug in thanks, and you catch the glint of a silver coin passed her way. You notice how the room hums not just with voices, but with the small movements of a living space, the scrape of a bench leg against the floor, the snap of a log in the hearth, the creak of the innkeeper's heavy boots as he crosses from the kitchen door to the ale barrels. Somewhere upstairs, a door bangs shut, and the muffled thump of footsteps reminds you there are rooms above each with their own creaky stories. The innkeeper himself is a broad man, middle-aged, with arms like he's been carrying kegs since birth. His tunic bears the stains of 100 dinners, but his manner is brisk and unbothered. He keeps one hand on a tankard, the other on the flow of his domain. You watch him draw a measure of ale from a barrel, froth curling over the lip, and pass it to a man in a faded cloak, who might be a pilgrim or might be something else entirely. Here travelers are a mixed lot. Some are here for a single night's rest before continuing to market towns. Others linger for days, nursing ale and gossip in equal measure. The inn serves as much as a news exchange as a shelter. Word of distant events filters in through these walls, wars brewing, harvests, failing, strange omens seen in the sky. You imagine if you listened long enough, you could piece together the whole patchwork of the medieval world right from this very bench. The smell of tonight's meal coils into the air, meat stewing with onions, carrots, and whatever herbs the kitchen garden can spare. A faint undertone of garlic clings to the steam. Someone begins a low song, the melody weaving lazily between the clink of cups. You feel the travel weariness begin to loosen from your shoulders, drawn out by the fire's glow and the gentle, predictable rhythms of the room. There's nothing flashy about this inn. It's not meant to impress, only to hold you for the night, the fire, the food, a roof that mostly keeps out the rain. But for a medieval traveler, that could be the difference between another dawn and a final lonely sleep on the roadside. You shift on the bench, feeling the wood's worn smoothness beneath your fingers, and let your gaze wander toward the narrow stairs at the back. Up there lies another part of the inn's story, one you'll climb toward soon enough. But for now, the warmth, the murmur of voices, and the slow rhythm of life inside these walls begin to wrap around you, like an old blanket well used, but familiar. And outside, the wind rattles the shutters, reminding you why you stepped inside in the first place. You lean back slightly, letting the firelight play on your face, though the bench's hard edge keeps you from settling in too much. Your eyes wander again to those narrow stairs tucked into the far corner. They rise steeply, the kind of staircase that demands your attention, with every step worn in the center, where generations of boots have trodden. The wood is darker, they're polished not by polish, but by the long, patient work of passing feet. No one rushes up or down. In a place like this, movement upstairs is measured and deliberate. Privacy is a rare commodity in a medieval inn, and the thin planks separating the common room from the chambers above don't keep much sound in or out. You can almost hear the whispered exchanges of guests who think they're unheard, the creak of rope beds shifting under restless sleepers, the muffled coughs and sighs that fill the darkness when the candles are blown out. Near the hearth, a traveling merchant is unfurling a bundle of cloth to show a curious onlooker. The fabric catches the light wool dyed in muted shades of madder red and wove blue patterns, simple but sturdy. There's no shouting or hard bargaining here. The talk is low, a little wary. Even in an inn, people keep one eye on their purse strings. A misplaced coin could vanish faster than steam from a soup pot. Behind you, the inn's door opens again, letting in a slice of cold night air. A figure steps inside, stamping mud from their boots. The lantern light catches a weathered face framed by a hood pulled low. They hesitate at the threshold, eyes scanning the room, weighing whether to stay. It's an unspoken ritual. You check the faces already gathered. You measure the mood. You decide if this is a safe place to sit and drink without trouble finding you. In the corner, the minstrels stir. One plucks idly at a lute string, letting the note ring and fade into the soft murmur of conversation. The other hums quietly, testing a melody. They are not yet ready to play in earnest, but even these small sounds add a layer to the inn's atmosphere, like the crackle of fire or the clink of mugs. You glance toward the kitchen door ajar, now spilling a rectangle of brighter light into the dim common room. Through it, you catch flashes of movement, a boy carrying a tray of trenchers, the cook's round form bending over a pot, a sudden flare as another log is thrown into the kitchen hearth. It's busier back there, the pace brisk but steady. Meals in an inn like this are not served in courses, but all at once when the pot is ready and the bread sliced. A man at the far end of the table calls for ale, his voice carrying easily across the room. The innkeeper moves to oblige, drawing from the barrel, with practiced turns of the tap. The ale here is local, brewed in small batches, cloudy and thick. It is not a refined drink, but it is filling and warming, the sort of draught that can see you through another few miles on the road tomorrow. Your gaze drifts to the beams overhead, massive timbers hewn from whole trunks still showing the marks of the adze. They are blackened in places from years of smoke and soot, yet they hold steady, a reminder of the inn's long endurance against time and weather. From one hangs a bunch of drying herbs, their scent faint under the stronger smells of stew and ale. Perhaps they are there to freshen the air, or perhaps to keep away the insects that find their way inside on summer nights. At the far wall, a narrow bench runs under a small shuttered window. The shutters are closed tight against the wind, but you imagine that in daylight they open onto the road outside, offering a view of passing carts and riders. For now, though, the world beyond those shutters might as well be a distant country. The room feels self-contained, an island of warmth and flickering light in a sea of night. The merchant has finished his quiet trade, folding the cloth back into its bundle. A pair of wagoners settle in beside him, shaking off their cloaks, their faces ruddy from the cold. One rubs his hands together briskly before leaning toward the fire. Their boots are caked with the thick clay of the road, leaving small clumps behind as they shift their feet. No one minds. The floor here has seen far worse. The serving woman returns, collecting empty trenchers and replacing them with fresh bread. Her sleeves are rolled up, showing strong forearms. She works quickly, moving in and out of conversations without breaking the rhythm of her task. When she reaches your side of the table, she gives you a brief, knowing look, as though she can tell exactly how far you've traveled today and how much more you'll be able to do tomorrow. Above, a faint creak signals someone's passage along the upper hallway. The sound moves slowly, each step deliberate, until a door opens with a muted groan. There's a pause, then the door closes again, and the quiet footfalls retreat toward the stair. It's a reminder that for all its openness, the inn keeps its private corners, spaces you have yet to explore. You wrap your hands around a mug, feeling the warmth seep into your fingers. The ale is heavier than you're used to, its taste earthy and slightly sour, but it goes well with the bread in front of you. You tear off a piece, the crust rough under your thumb, and dip it into the stew's thick broth. The flavors are simple root vegetables, a little meat, a pinch of whatever herbs were at hand, but in this moment they are more than enough. The night deepens, and the conversations around you settle into lower tones. Some guests drift into silence, eyes half closed in the firelight. The minstrels exchange a glance, and at last one begins to strum a slow, winding tune, the kind that loops lazily through the ear until it becomes part of the room itself. Outside, the wind presses against the walls, but here inside the night feels far away. The lute's melody drapes itself across the room like a worn but well-loved blanket, the notes lingering in the spaces between breaths. Each strum feels deliberate, unhurried, as if the minstrel knows there's no need to rush a song when the night has hours yet to unfold. His companion adds a soft hum barely above the crackle of the fire, shaping the tune into something familiar, but just out of reach of memory. You glance again toward the stairs, their shadowy rise a reminder of the rooms above. The thought of climbing them makes your knees ache in sympathy with the day's walk, yet there's something almost magnetic about them, a promise of rest, perhaps, or simply the mystery of what lies behind those crooked doors. But here in the common room, warmth holds you in place. The inn's light is a patchwork firelight flaring against one wall, candle flame shimmering on another, and pockets of shadow in between. The corners seem deeper than they should be, as if they might stretch beyond the room itself. One such corner is occupied by a man in a dark wool cloak, his face mostly hidden by the hood. Now and then he shifts the faint clink of something metallic coming from beneath his cloak. A merchant's scales, a dagger, or perhaps just the chain of a coin purse, it's not polite to ask. The innkeeper moves with the calm authority of someone who knows every inch of this place. You watch as he stoops to stir the hearth with a long iron poker, coaxing the embers into a brighter glow. The sudden flare of orange light reveals more details: the soot-darkened stones of the chimney, a small brass pot tucked at the edge of the fire for keeping ale warm, the rough texture of the hearth's flagstones under his boots. A murmur rises from the far table, two men comparing tales of the road. You catch fragments, talk of a flooded ford several miles south of a peddler robbed on the moors of a bridge with its planks worn so thin you can see the water flashing between them. None of it seems to surprise the listeners. Such news is part of life here, stitched into the fabric of travel like the seams of a worn cloak. The serving woman returns again, this time with a jug of fresh ale. She tips it expertly into mugs, never spilling a drop despite the dim light. Her movements are brisk, efficient, and when she catches the innkeeper's eye, a silent conversation seems to pass between them, a tally of orders perhaps, or the subtle managing of guests who've had one drink too many. Overhead, the timbers groan faintly as someone walks across them. You follow the sound upward, with your eyes tracing the rough-hewn beams that hold the upper floor. They are old, older than the memory of most living here, and you can see the joinery where peg meets mortise, the kind of craftsmanship that holds a building together for centuries, if left in peace. A flicker of movement draws your attention to the kitchen door. A boy slips through arms laden with kindling, his small boots scuffing against the floorboards. He disappears behind the hearth, stacking the wood neatly in a nook, before vanishing back into the kitchen. His quiet efficiency is almost part of the inn's rhythm, a reminder that much of its life happens in the background. The minstrel's song drifts toward its close, the final notes fading like embers cooling in the grate. For a moment, the quiet feels heavier, as if the room is taking a slow, collective breath. Then the murmur of conversation resumes, filling the space once more. Someone laughs softly. Another coughs into a sleeve. The fire snaps, sending a tiny spray of sparks upward. Your gaze drifts toward the shuttered window again. The wooden panels fit imperfectly, and you imagine the wind slipping through their seams, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant wood smoke. Beyond them lies the road, muddy-rutted, stretching on toward towns whose names you may never learn. But tonight you are sheltered from it, the walls around you holding back the night's bite. A man near the door removes his boots with a grunt of relief, setting them beside him. The soles are caked with the day's journey, and steam rises faintly from the damp leather. He wiggles his toes inside woolen hose, sighing, as the warmth seeps back into his feet. Across from him, another guest trims a candle wick. With a small knife, the tiny motion sending a fresh curl of smoke into the air. The inn smells of comfort and wear, wood smoke, damp wool, the faint tang of ale, and the deep, steady aroma of the pottage still simmering. Somewhere upstairs, a hinge squeals briefly, the sound swallowed almost at once by the heavy quiet. You take another sip from your mug, letting the ale's weight settle in your stomach, and feel the day loosening its grip on your bones. There's a timelessness to this place. You could almost believe the same conversations have been repeating here for decades, that the same footsteps have worn the same grooves into the floor. Outside empires may rise and fall, roads may be built or crumble away, but within these walls, the small rituals of the evening endure: fire-tended mugs, refilled songs, played boots, dried by the hearth. The night is far from over, yet the inn has already wrapped you in its rhythm, the kind that slows your thoughts and narrows your world to the span of a wooden bench and the flicker of firelight. Soon perhaps you'll climb those stairs, feel the boards shift beneath your feet, and discover the quiet world of the upper rooms. But for now, you stay by the hearth, letting the music, the murmur, and the steady warmth lull you deeper into the inn's embrace. At last, the moment comes when you decide to leave the hearth's comfortable glow. The bench creaks as you stand, and your knees remind you just how long you've been sitting. A few nearby faces glance up briefly, then return to their mugs. Your shadow stretches across the floorboards as you move toward the stairs in the far corner. The staircase is narrow, built more for thrift than grace, and it rises steeply, an economy of space in a building where every inch matters. You grip the rail, a simple beam worn smooth and glossy by centuries of hands. Each step protests under your weight, with a familiar groan, as though the boards remember every traveler who's passed this way. The air changes as you climb, losing the earthy heat of the common room and taking on a cooler, drier quality. Halfway up, you pause, glancing back down at the common room. From this angle, it seems smaller, its flickering firelight dimmer the faces below, half lost in shadow. The minstrel's lute drifts up in thin strands of melody, blending with the murmur of voices into a soft, indistinct hum. You turn back toward the landing, the boards shifting faintly underfoot. The upper hallway is low-ceilinged and dim, lit only by a single iron sconce holding a stub of candle. The walls are plain timber, their seams filled with packed earth and straw. In some places, the plaster has crumbled away, revealing the rough weave of wattle beneath. The floor is just as uneven here as below the boards, warping gently toward the middle with age. Several doors line the hallway, each one different. Some are heavy planks with crude iron latches. Others are little more than wide boards fastened together with crossbeams. The wood is scarred, scratched, and in some cases faintly burned near the edges, where candle flames once strayed too close. You imagine each door as a marker of countless nights, nights of laughter, nights of argument, nights when weary travelers collapsed without a word. The first door you pass is ajar, revealing a cramped chamber inside. A narrow bed of rope and straw dominates the space, covered with a coarse wool blanket in a faded russet hue. A single stool sits beside it, holding a tallow candle stub in a clay dish. The air smells faintly of dried rushes and old wool. There's little else, no decoration, no comfort beyond the bare essentials. This is a bed meant for sleeping and nothing more. Further along, another door stands closed, a faint snore audible from within. You step lightly, unwilling to disturb whoever has found their rest. The sound of your footfall is muffled by the rushes strewn along the hallway floor, replaced in the morning, when the air grows stale with smoke and sweat. At the far end of the hall, a larger door is propped open, revealing a room slightly better appointed. Here the bed is wider, the blanket a deeper shade of blue, and a small chest sits against the wall for storing belongings. A wash basin rests on a wooden stand, though the water in it is clouded and cold. This room may be for a merchant of some standing, or perhaps a well-paying pilgrim willing to trade silver for a little privacy. You step inside briefly, your fingers brushing the blanket's coarse weave. The air is still here, holding the faint scent of lavender, perhaps from a sachet tucked among the bedclothes to keep away moths. The single window is shuttered tight, though a thin line of moonlight seeps between the boards. Outside, the wind presses against them in gentle, rhythmic gusts. From here, the inn feels different. The common room below hums like a distant memory, its warmth replaced by a stillness that seems to settle over every beam and board. You can almost sense the building breathing around you, wood expanding and contracting in the cool night air. Somewhere in the hall, a door latch clicks softly. A figure slips from one room to another, carrying a small lantern, whose light pools in a golden circle at their feet. Their face is hidden by the hood of a cloak, their steps soundless on the rushes. They glance your way briefly, not stopping, and vanish into the next room, the door closing behind them with a muted thud. You return to the hallway and continue exploring. One room's door hangs slightly off its hinge, revealing a jumble of straw on the floor, perhaps used as a cheaper lodging for those who cannot afford even the humblest bed. Another holds a bench beneath its window, the wall beside it covered in carved initials. Travelers leave their marks in such places, a way of saying, "I was here long after their names are forgotten." The candle in the sconce burns low, its light growing weaker, shadows lengthening along the walls. You find yourself slowing your steps, letting the quiet wrap around you. The sounds here are small, the faint scurry of a mouse between floorboards, the sigh of wind through a crack in the shutter, the muted murmur of a voice behind a closed door. You pause at one last room near the stairs. The door is shut, but from within comes the faint rhythm of breathing, steady, deep, the sound of someone fast asleep. You imagine the figure lying beneath the rough blanket, their boots set neatly by the bed, their pouch tucked under the pillow for safety. Outside their dreams, the night passes slowly, the inn's timbers creaking now and then, as if turning in their own sleep. The hallway seems to exhale as you step back toward the stairs. Down below, the common room still glows its life, carrying on without you. Soon you'll descend again, drawn back by the promise of firelight and perhaps another mug of ale. But you know now the other half of the inn's story, the part that unfolds behind closed doors in the hush of shadowed rooms where travelers drift into dreams, while the road waits patiently for them outside. You make your way back down the narrow stairs, hand brushing the smooth wood of the railing. Each step groans in mild complaint, as though mildly resentful to be disturbed again. The common room rises to meet you first, the glow, then the low voices, then the smell of hearth smoke and ale. From above it seemed smaller, quieter, but as your boots find the floorboards again, you feel the life of the room settle around you once more. The air down here has shifted slightly since you left. The pottage is gone from the trestle table, the clay bowls stacked in the corner, to be scrubbed clean in the morning. In its place, mugs of ale dominate the space, the evening having tipped past the point of hearty eating and into the gentle lingering of drink. The voices are softer now, more deliberate. Laughter has thinned to the occasional low chuckle usually shared between two rather than tossed out into the whole room. You ease back into your place near the hearth. The heat greets you like an old friend settling into your bones. Someone has shifted the logs since you left. The flames burn lower, more ember than fire now, but their glow is steady and comforting. The occasional pop sends a faint halo of sparks upward before they wink out in the dimness above. The minstrels have packed away their lutes, the instruments now resting in a corner beneath a folded wool cloak. One of them leans against the wall with a cup in hand, speaking quietly to a man who wears the badge of a city guild on his tunic. Whatever they discuss, it's spoken in that half-distracted way of people whose eyes are half on the fire, half on the drifting thoughts of the late hour. At the far end of the table, the merchant you noticed earlier now sits alone, slowly counting coins from a small leather pouch. He pauses now and again to glance toward the door as though weighing whether to leave or order another drink. His fingers are deft, the coins passing one to the other with the faintest metallic chime. The innkeeper has slowed his pace, too. He stands behind the bar, polishing a mug with a rag that's seen better days, his gaze sweeping the room in slow arcs. Now and then he steps away to refill a cup or to check the barrels, but mostly he seems content to let the evening wind itself down without his hand upon it. The serving woman appears once more at her basket, now laden with small loaves of coarse bread for anyone still peckish. She moves more slowly than before, the sharp pace of the dinner hour replaced by a kind of quiet tidying. At one table she sweeps crumbs into her palm and tucks them away in the basket feed for chickens, perhaps when morning comes. Outside, the wind presses again at the shutters. It's not the hard, rattling wind of a storm, but a persistent whispering that makes the wood tremble ever so slightly in its frame. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the road lies empty its ruts filled with shadow. The only travelers now are the ones within these walls. A man in the corner begins to hum no words, just a simple repetitive melody. It blends with the low voices and the crackle of the hearth until it becomes another thread in the room's fabric. You find your eyes half closing, not from weariness alone, but from the way the scene seems to fold in on itself. The fire, the hum, the smell of wood and ale, the murmur of travelers who have no reason to hurry anywhere tonight. You glance toward the door. It has not opened since your return. The latch gleams faintly in the light, and you can imagine the cold just beyond it. That barrier between in and out feels more absolute now. To leave would be to break the seal of warmth that has gathered here over the hours. The embers shift, sending a faint wave of warmth across your face. You notice the ash beginning to pile at the base of the hearth, gray and fine. It will be swept up in the morning, when the new day calls for a fresh fire, but for now it rests undisturbed. The inn, too, seems to be settling into a kind of ash-soft quiet. At one table, two wagoners speak in low tones about the morrow's journey. You hear talk of a river crossing and the need to be on the road before dawn if they want to reach the next market town by midday. They drink slowly between sentences as though their mugs are more for warming their hands than for slaking any real thirst. The boy who carried the kindling earlier reappears this time with a small broom. He begins to sweep near the doorway, careful not to disturb the tables. His strokes are short, deliberate, the bristles whispering against the boards. When he reaches the hearth, he pauses to poke at a glowing ember with the broom's handle, then moves on. The hour is late enough now that fatigue hangs in the air like a soft weight. Conversations stretch longer between words, and the silences between them grow wider. The inn feels as though it is holding its breath, waiting for the final few guests to rise, climb the stairs, and leave the common room to its slumber. Your own limbs feel heavy, the thought of climbing the stairs, again no longer a chore, but an inevitability. Yet you linger a little longer, unwilling to let go of the gentle hum of the place just yet. In the quiet of this hour, the inn feels more like a living thing than a building breathing, settling, preparing for its own long sleep until morning. At last, the night begins to loosen its hold on the common room. One by one, the final conversations taper into silence. A merchant pushes back his bench with a muted scrape and stands stretching his back until the joints give a small crack. He tucks his purse deep into his belt, gathers his cloak, and heads for the stairs without a word. His boots sound heavy on the steps, the boards answering each tread with a weary creak. The wagoners are next to rise. They finish the last of their ale nod toward the innkeeper and exchange a few murmured words. Cloaks are drawn tight around shoulders, boots scuff against the floor, and their shapes melt into the dimness of the stairwell. A moment later, their voices are nothing more than a muffled blur above. By the hearth, the minstrels have folded their cloaks and draped them over their arms. One blows gently on the embers as if to coax a last lick of flame, but the hearth is past coaxing now. It glows instead, steady, patient warm without needing to flare. They move toward the stairs together, boots light, as though mindful not to disturb whatever quiet spell has settled over the room. The serving woman, her sleeves still rolled high, makes one final round. She lifts empty mugs from the table, stacks them deftly in her arms, and carries them to the counter. The sound of pottery on wood is gentle but distinct, the day's last echo of clinking dishes. She pauses at the doorway to the kitchen, leaning her shoulder into the frame, listening. When she hears nothing new called for, she nods faintly to herself and disappears behind the door. The boy with the broom has finished his work. He sets the broom against the wall, yawns into his sleeve, and glances toward the innkeeper for permission. A nod passes between them, and the boy shuffles toward the back, rubbing one eye with his fist. His small footsteps fade quickly into the darker passages beyond. The innkeeper remains at his post a little longer, standing behind the bar with his hands resting flat on the counter. His gaze sweeps the room one final time, taking in the low tables, the benches pushed askew, the pile of ashes beneath the hearth. He walks slowly to the fireplace, stoops, and shifts the logs so the embers lie together in a neat bed. Satisfied, he straightens, wipes his hands on his tunic, and blows out the nearest candle. The darkness in that corner spreads gently like ink seeping through paper. Soon another candle is snuffed, then another. The room doesn't go dark all at once. It exhales its light gradually, letting shadow pool in the far edges before it dares creep toward the center. The hearth remains the heart of it all, its glow holding the room in a deep, quiet embrace. Only you remain near the fire now. The bench beneath you has warmed to your body's shape, and you hesitate before breaking that fit. There's something about this hour, when the day is fully spent, and the night has claimed every corner that feels almost sacred. The inn is no longer a place of bustle and talk, but of rest and memory, its energy folded inward like a book closed for the night. When you finally stand, the sound feels louder than it should. Your boots make the floorboards speak, and you realize how rare noise has become in the past few minutes. The stairs wait in the far corner shadows, flowing down their steps. You take them slowly, gripping the railing, mindful not to disturb the sleepers above. The hallway greets you again with its cool stillness. The rushes underfoot rustle faintly as you walk, a dry whisper that seems loud against the backdrop of silence. Most of the doors are shut now, the slivers of candlelight beneath them gone. Only one remains ajar, a faint glow spilling onto the floorboards. Inside, you glimpse the serving woman folding blankets over a bed. She glances up just long enough to give a small nod, then returns to her task, the fabric whispering between her hands. You reach your room and push the door open with care. The hinges give a soft groan, and you step inside, closing the door gently behind you. The chamber is just as you left it. Straw bed, coarse blanket, single stool by the wall. You set your belongings on the stool and lower yourself onto the bed, the ropes beneath the straw creaking quietly in protest. Through the shuttered window, the wind sighs now and then, a reminder of the cold world outside. You lie back, feeling the uneven lump of the mattress beneath your shoulder, but even its imperfections carry a kind of comfort. The blanket is rough, the air cool, but the day's journey is behind you, and the road will not call until morning. Somewhere beyond the door, the innkeeper makes his final round, his footsteps measured and deliberate. One by one, the last candles are snuffed out. The hallway grows darker, the air quieter, until the inn rests in a stillness so complete, it feels as if the whole world has gone to sleep. Your eyes grow heavy, lulled by the deep quiet, the faint scent of wood smoke lingering in the air, and the muffled creak of beams settling into the night. This is the hour when the inn truly belongs to its sleepers, when its walls gather the breath of a dozen dreams and keep them safe until morning's light returns. Sleep comes slowly in a place like this. You drift toward it not in a steady plunge, but in small, wavering steps, half in the world, half out. The rope bed shifts faintly beneath you. Whenever you turn, its creak, sounding loud in the thick quiet. Beyond the blanket's scratchy embrace, the cool air brushes your face, carrying the faint tang of smoke and the earthy dryness of old rushes. Your ears, more alert than your mind, catch the subtle signs of a building at rest. Somewhere deep in the frame, a timber gives a slow, aching groan, as if turning in its sleep. A loose shutter on the far side of the building rattles gently when the wind pushes against it. The sound is not harsh. It's the sort of restless whisper that belongs to an old structure, a reminder that even in stillness it moves. A muffled footstep reaches you from the hallway. It comes slowly, deliberate, but unhurried, like someone who knows exactly which boards to step on to avoid the loudest creaks. You imagine the innkeeper on his final check lantern in hand, making sure all doors are latched and all embers safe. The light doesn't touch your door, but you see the faintest flicker against the far wall as he passes. The step fades, replaced by the tiny sigh of air moving under the doorframe. The silence settles again, deeper now. You let your eyes close fully, but the world behind them still feels tethered to the room sounds and sensations weaving in and out of half-formed dreams. In one drifting moment, you think you hear soft voices somewhere below, perhaps in the common room or near the kitchen. A word or two carries upward indistinct, followed by the soft thud of something being set down. Then nothing. Your mind wanders toward the road outside. Though you cannot hear it, you picture the empty ruts glistening faintly in moonlight, the hedgerows huddled against the chill. Somewhere far along, a lone traveler might be walking still, their boots heavy, their breath clouding in the cold. But here they are absent. Here the world is reduced to 4 timber walls, a low ceiling, and the slow breathing of sleepers. From a neighboring room, a short cough interrupts the quiet. It's followed by the sound of a body turning in bed, the rope creaking, the straw whispering. A moment later, the faint rustle stills, and all is quiet again. The closeness of these sounds reminds you how thin the walls are. Privacy here is a fragile thing, as fleeting as the quiet between two waking moments. The building seems to breathe around you. The wind outside presses the wood, pushes back. Each sound is softened by the layers of night, the shift of the floorboards, the click of a latch somewhere distant, the muted thump of something, perhaps a loose shutter, finding its rest against the wall. Your thoughts meander with the sounds slipping toward dream, but catching now and then on some small detail, the faint scent of the lavender sachet from earlier, the texture of the blanket beneath your fingers, the memory of firelight bending and flickering against the beams below. At some point, minutes or perhaps an hour later, you are stirred by a new sound, the slow, steady roll of a cartwheel far down the road. It reaches you as a low vibration through the night, accompanied by the soft rhythm of hooves, a traveler passing the inn without stopping. The sounds draw near, linger just long enough to mark their presence, then fade into the distance until they're no more than an imagined echo. Your eyes open briefly to the soft dark of the room. The faint silver of moonlight has found its way between the shutters, laying a pale stripe across the floor. Dust motes drift lazily in its glow, too slow for the eye to follow for long. Beyond that thin light, the rest of the room is swallowed in shadow. Once more a sound comes from the hall, a door creaking open, followed by a few hushed words, exchanged in a tone too low to understand. The voices fade quickly, replaced by the gentle click of the latch returning to place. Whoever it was moves away, their steps muffled, swallowed by the long, narrow corridor. The night stretches on. You turn onto your side, the blanket sliding over you with a dry rustle. The rope beneath the straw gives a small sigh, as though the bed itself is easing into comfort. Outside, the wind changes, bringing with it a new note, a faint patter on the roof, irregular and light. Rain, or perhaps the first warning drops before a heavier fall. You listen to it, gather the sound as soft as fingers tapping on a table. It mingles with the breathing quiet of the inn, until the two are indistinguishable. And so you drift again, deeper this time, the small world of the room folding gently around you, while the inn keeps watch through the small, secret hours. The rain lingers, patient and unhurried, a faint, steady tapping across the roof's uneven tiles. It's not a hard downpour, just the kind of soft shower that fills the air with a low, muffled rhythm. You listen without thinking, the sound wrapping itself into your half-formed dreams. Somewhere inside, the timbers respond with a slow, answering creak, as though the building is shifting its weight to settle in for the rest of the night. You drift, surface drift again. Time here feels loose, slippery, the hours measured less by a clock than by the changing pitch of the rain, the subtle adjustments of the wind outside. The fire in the common room below has likely collapsed into a quiet bed of gray ash, its last glow hidden deep within. The inn now breathes at the slow pace of sleepers. At some point, a faint scraping sound reaches you from the hall. It's so slight, you might have missed it if you were deeper in dream. You hold still, listening. Another scrape followed by the gentle pad of bare feet on the rush-strewn boards. The steps pass your door, pause for a heartbeat, then move on. There's a muted creak as a latch is lifted, a door opening farther along the corridor. A moment later, the sound closes behind it, leaving the hallway empty again. You roll onto your back, staring at the blackness overhead. a single droplet finds its way from the roof down to the window frame where it lands with the tiniest click against the shutter. It repeats irregular but persistent a little reminder that not all is perfectly sealed against the weather. In winter, that faint gap would let in a fine thread of cold air. Tonight, it only carries the smell of wet earth from outside. The inn feels like it has retreated into itself. Downstairs, you can almost picture the bar empty, the benches pushed in, the serving boards stacked neatly against the wall. In the kitchen, the great pot has been cleaned and turned upside down on the hearthstone to dry. Somewhere near the back, the boy you saw earlier sleeps on a heap of blankets curled tightly under his own patched quilt. You imagine the animals in the small yard beyond, perhaps a few pack horses tied under the lean-to, shifting in their sleep, their breath misting in the cool night air. If there are chickens, they will be roosting now, feathers puffed against the damp. Even the dogs, if the inn keeps them, will have found a warm spot out of the rain, their watchful ears relaxing for these quiet hours. Your thoughts wander to the road beyond the shutters. In this rain, the ruts will be gathering puddles, the grass along the verges darkening with moisture. A lone rider might pass now and then, the muffled thud of hooves blending with the rain, but most travelers will have sought shelter long ago. In the medieval world, the night belongs to those indoors. The road at this hour is another country entirely silent, unlit, and vast in its emptiness. From the far side of the hallway comes a sudden cough, short, rough, followed by the sound of someone sitting up in bed. A moment later, the rope frame creaks, then the floorboards take on the faint rhythm of slow pacing. You picture the figure rubbing sleep from their eyes, perhaps pouring water from a small jug into a cup. The steps fade again, replaced by the soft rustle of a blanket being drawn back into place. The rain's song deepens as the shower grows slightly heavier, pattering more insistently against the roof. You can hear it trickling along the edge of the eaves, now spilling into the narrow gutter, before dripping to the ground below. The sound is soothing in its constancy, a reminder that the inn's walls hold you safe against the damp. The rope bed beneath you feels more forgiving, now the straw shifting subtly to cradle your weight. You tuck the blanket closer under your chin, the coarse wool scratchy but warm. The scent of the lavender sachet from earlier rises faintly when you move, old, but still present, a ghost of summer pressed into the fabric. You close your eyes again, letting the rain's rhythm fold around you. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you note that the air has grown cooler, a sign that the night is slowly pushing toward its deepest point. In the hours before dawn, the world contracts to its quietest state. No carts, no hoofbeats, no voices, only the whisper of rain on wood and the slow, sleeping heartbeat of the inn itself. In this small, enclosed world, time stretches without urgency. The day's roads are behind you, tomorrow's ahead, but for now there is only the steady sound above the safe darkness around you, and the ancient timbers holding their place against the turning of the night. Somewhere in the long stretch of hours, the rain begins to loosen its hold. You don't notice the exact moment it fades so gradually that you only become aware of its absence when the silence seems deeper than before. The steady tapping overhead softens to an occasional drip from the eaves, and then even that is swallowed into the stillness. The darkness feels softer now, less heavy. You can't see it, but you can sense the sky outside beginning to pale in some distant way, the first imperceptible nudge toward morning. The air in the room has cooled a little further. When you shift, a small breath of it slips down the back of your neck, finding the space between blanket and skin. A faint creak breaks the quiet. It comes from the hall, measured careful steps, not the quiet padding of the innkeeper's late-night round, but the slightly uneven tread of someone who has just woken and is still finding their balance. The steps pass your door without pause, heading toward the stair. You hear the faintest whisper of the lower latch being lifted, followed by the low groan of the front door easing open. For a moment, the night air rushes in, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and wood smoke from some distant chimney. The door closes again, and you hear the slow, deliberate sound of a bolt sliding home. Whoever it was has gone out, or perhaps only checked the yard. The steps return upstairs, fading into the hush. You roll onto your side, facing the window. A thin line of light has begun to seep between the shutters, not bright, but enough to draw your eye. Dust motes shift lazily in the beam when you stir. Outside, the sky must be shifting from deep black to that softer shade that comes before dawn, though the stars are still keeping their places for now. Somewhere beyond your door, another sound joins the quiet, a single cough, then the gentle scrape of a stool against the floor. A hinge gives a soft protest as a door opens. The smell of cool air and faint ashes drifts into the hallway. The early risers are beginning their day. You think of the kitchen below, still dark for now. Soon it will stir with the muffled thud of logs set onto the hearth, the rush of air as a fire catches the quiet clatter of clay mugs being set out. The innkeeper will appear before long, hair still mussed from sleep, to draw water, check the barrels, and see to the yard. Another faint sound reaches you. The shuffle of boots on the floor above the common room. Perhaps someone is gathering their things for the road, folding a cloak, checking the straps of a pack. In the medieval world, dawn is not a slow luxury. It is a call to set out before the day's work swells too large. You pull the blanket a little closer, knowing you still have a few moments before you need to rise. In these last instants of half-sleep, the inn feels almost like a living memory, holding you gently before letting you return to the road. The walls have not yet taken on the day's busier sounds. The floorboards still belong to the night, and the air still carries the unbroken calm of its deepest hours. From outside, faint at first, but growing clearer, comes the trill of a bird testing the morning air. It is a sound too delicate to belong to the full daylight. It belongs here in this liminal space between night and dawn. The song drifts through the shutter's seam, lingering in the quiet room before fading again. The pale stripe on the floor has grown slightly wider now, the light finding new ways through the gaps in the wood. You can picture the sky beyond a dim cloud-soft gray, replacing the night's velvet black. If you opened the shutters now, you'd see the world holding its breath for the day's first full light. The road slick with last night's rain, the yard shining faintly with dew, the hedges drooping with water that will sparkle once the sun clears the horizon. For the moment, though, you stay as you are. The inn's slow waking feels like a tide turning steady, inevitable, yet unhurried. You can hear it in the soft scuff of feet above, in the faint clink of a latch, in the occasional low murmur of voices joining the air. The day has begun its approach, but it has not yet claimed the quiet. The sounds of morning gather quietly, at first, like threads weaving themselves into the air. A door shuts softly somewhere down the hall. A floorboard groans under a careful step. Then from below you hear the muffled thump of logs set onto the hearthstone, and the gentle rush of air as they're coaxed into flame. The faint scent of smoke follows soon after, creeping up the stairwell in delicate curls. Your blanket holds you a moment longer, but the call of the day is too insistent now. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed, your feet finding the cool boards beneath the thin mat of rushes. The rope bed sighs as you stand, and the straw shifts softly back into place. The air in the room is brisk enough to quicken your breathing, though not unpleasantly, so it carries the freshness of a world just washed by rain. When you open your door, the hallway greets you with a dim, slanting light from the single candle in its sconce. The rushes underfoot are already marked by a few sets of prints, evidence of those who have gone before you. From a room nearby comes the muted rustle of cloth being folded, the thud of a pack settling into place. You take the narrow stairs slowly, your hand trailing along the familiar smoothness of the rail. Halfway down the common room comes into view the hearth is already waking, the first flames licking at the logs, sending flickers of light across the soot-darkened stones. The innkeeper is crouched before it, feeding kindling into the blaze with practiced care. His tunic is loose, his hair still mussed from sleep, but his movements are steady and unhurried. On the trestle table, 2 mugs and a loaf of coarse bread have been set out. The crust is dark and dense, the kind meant to withstand a day in a traveler's pack. Beside it sits a clay pitcher, beads of moisture clinging to its surface. The innkeeper pours a measure of small ale into one of the mugs, the cloudy liquid catching a moment of firelight. The serving woman appears from the kitchen, her sleeves already rolled high. She carries a basket of small rolls, their steam curling faintly into the cool air. She sets them down on the table, then turns back to fetch more. Her steps are brisk, but quiet. The hour calls for readiness, not chatter. Near the door, a man in a thick wool cloak is tightening the strap of his pack. His boots still damp from the day before rest, nearby their soles darkened by the road's clay. He lifts them, slips them on, and works the laces with practiced hands. The morning is not a place for lingering. From outside comes the first clearer note of the waking world, the creak of a stable door opening, the low snort of a horse shaking off its sleep. The sound is followed by the measured rhythm of hooves shifting in straw. Whoever tends the animals is already at work checking harnesses, loosening the stiffness from the night. The boy you saw sweeping last night shuffles in from the yard, his hair sticking up in stubborn tufts. He carries a small bucket in each hand, the metal rims damp from the well. He sets them down by the hearth, nods at the innkeeper, and disappears into the kitchen. The inn itself feels different now, less enclosed, more outward-facing. The shutters on the common room's window have been pulled open a crack, letting in the gray, soft light of early morning. Through it, you can just make out the road, dark and wet, leading away in both directions. A thin mist hangs low over the hedges, blurring the line between earth and air. The minstrels from last night descend the stairs together, their lutes strapped across their backs. They greet the innkeeper with a quiet word, take a mug each from the table, and drink, standing eyes on the sliver of road visible through the open shutters. Their voices are low, their laughter muted but genuine. Another guest, one of the wagoners, emerges from the back cloak folded over his arm. He exchanges a few words with the innkeeper about the state of the road ahead, the conversation slow but purposeful. They nod at the news that the ford south of here is passable again, though still swollen from recent rains. The hearth catches fully now, flames climbing higher, sending a warm orange wash across the room. You feel it on your face as you take a seat at the edge of the bench, tearing a small piece from the fresh bread. It is dense, faintly sour, the kind that pairs well with the mild bitterness of the morning ale. Above you, the last of the upstairs doors open and shut. Footsteps descend, boots thudding gently on the stairs. The room begins to fill not with the lively bustle of the evening, but with the quiet, efficient movements of people who have a road to meet. Mugs are drained, cloaks shrugged on straps, tightened. The smell of warm bread and wood smoke mixes with the faint, damp scent of the world outside. In the medieval inn, mornings belong to the road. No one lingers longer than they must, and the day's first hours are a procession of departures. Boots on the stair, the door's latch lifting, the sound of voices carried briefly into the yard before fading into the mist. The first to leave is the man in the thick wool cloak. He takes his bread wrapped in a scrap of linen, drains the last of his ale in 2 deliberate swallows, and pulls the door open against the cool morning air. A faint rush of damp wind slips in as he steps out into the yard, the latch falling softly into place behind him. Through the gap in the shutters, you see him pause just long enough to draw the hood over his head before vanishing toward the road. The wagoners follow soon after, speaking in short, practical phrases. Their boots sound heavy on the floorboards as they cross the room, the wooden planks giving an occasional tired groan beneath them. Outside, the rattle of harness buckles carries through the doorway, followed by the low, breathy whicker of horses recognizing familiar hands. The yard beyond the inn is stirring now, alive with the sounds of preparation. Hooves scuff in damp straw, a cartwheel gives a reluctant squeal as it turns, leather straps slap softly against the sides of restless animals. The mist thickens and thins in lazy curls clinging to the low fence posts before drifting toward the road. From within the common room, the smell of the rekindled hearth deepens, mingling with the sharper scent of the morning air that drifts in each time the door opens. You sit with your mug between your palms, feeling the slow seep of its warmth into your fingers. The bread beside you is cool now, its crust rough under your thumb. The minstrels finish their quiet meal and rise, slinging their instruments over their shoulders. One adjusts the strap of his lute, the other checks the small pouch at his belt. They nod their thanks to the innkeeper, who returns the gesture with a small lift of his hand. Outside, their shapes dissolve into the yard's soft gray light, their voices disappearing into the muted clink of harness metal and the rustle of hay. The serving woman moves between tables, gathering empty mugs, her steps unhurried but certain. Each time she passes the hearth, she glances toward the doorway, perhaps counting the guests who remain. The boy appears at her side now, and then carrying a stack of wooden trenchers from the kitchen to be dried later in the day. His small boots leave damp prints on the floorboards that fade almost as quickly as they appear. Another cart rolls into motion outside, its iron-bound wheels bumping against the uneven stones. The driver calls softly to the horses, his voice low and rhythmic. The sound fades in stages, first the creak of the axles, then the hoofbeats, and finally the soft hiss of wheels on the wet road. For a moment, the yard falls into a brief hush, broken only by the occasional shuffle of the remaining animals. Inside, the inn feels lighter with each departure. The bench is empty, the quiet stretches between voices grow longer. The innkeeper leans on the counter, one hand absently tracing the rim of a mug, the other resting on the wood's worn edge. He watches each departure with a calm familiarity, as if every morning were the same, a slow unwinding of the night's gathered company until only the building itself remains. From the kitchen comes the faint rhythmic sound of a knife on a wooden board. The serving woman hums under her breath as she works her tune as slow and even as the cut of the blade. The boy passes through with a bucket heading toward the yard to toss feed to the chickens. A handful of pale feathers drift in behind him on the faintest current of air. The last of the early risers gathers his things, now a small satchel, a walking stick smoothed by years of use. He nods politely to you as he passes the kind of nod given by one traveler to another without expecting a name. The door opens once more to the cool air, and he steps out. His form soon swallowed by the shifting mist. For the first time since you came downstairs, the door stays closed for more than a minute. The yard outside has quieted again. No more harness bells, no more hoofbeats, no more low murmur of travel-ready voices. The inn has reached the turning point between the two halves of its day, the bustling, purposeful morning, and the quieter, slower hours that follow. The innkeeper exhales through his nose, glances toward the empty benches, and begins the slow work of putting the room in order. Mugs are gathered into a basin, crumbs brushed from the trestle table, a stray glove found and set aside for when its owner eventually notices it missing. The serving woman sweeps the rushes into small piles, her broom making a soft, whispering path along the boards. The fire burns lower now, its first burst of morning heat giving way to a steady, measured flame. You sit and watch the ash shift in the hearth, listening to the small crackle of a stubborn ember breaking apart. Somewhere outside, a bird calls again, clearer now, as though announcing that the day has truly arrived. The road waits beyond the gate, but for the moment, you remain in your seat, letting the quiet reclaim the space. The inn is no longer a place of arrivals and departures. It is simply itself again holding the pause between the night just past and the day still unfolding. The room feels larger now that the travelers are gone, as though their voices and movements had been holding the walls a little closer together. Without them, the air stretches into the corners, filling with the softer sounds of the inn at work. The clink of crockery from the kitchen, the soft scrape of the broom as the serving woman moves along the floor, the occasional creak of a beam settling into its place. Sunlight has begun to press more firmly at the shutters. Where they are cracked open, narrow beams of pale gold slip into the common room, catching in the drifting wisps of smoke from the hearth. The yard outside is no longer a gray blur. Patches of damp earth straw and puddled stone are now visible in the growing light. The rain from the night before has left a thin sheen on the road, beyond which glistens faintly whenever the sun catches it. The innkeeper moves through the space with a different energy, now not the brisk efficiency of morning departures, but the slower, steadier pace of maintenance. He gathers empty mugs into a wooden basin, lifts the basin with both hands, and carries it toward the kitchen. On his return, he checks the barrels by the wall, tilting his head to judge their fullness, and makes a mental note you can see but not hear. The serving woman pauses to shake out the rushes near the hearth, sending a faint scent of dry grass into the air. She bends to sweep the ash that is scattered onto the hearthstone back into the fire's heart, where it glows faintly in the low light. The boy appears at her side, dragging a small stool across the floor, with more enthusiasm than grace. He clambers onto it to reach a high shelf where he retrieves a stack of wooden trenchers. These he carries carefully with both arms to the long table, setting them down one by one. From the yard comes the soft cluck and shuffle of chickens moving through straw. The boy disappears outside for a few minutes and returns with a small basket of eggs which he hands over to the serving woman without a word. She accepts them, turning immediately toward the kitchen to begin whatever quiet preparations will fill the next few hours. The inn has taken on a liminal quality now, neither the crowded haven of the night before nor the bustling departure point of dawn. It is a private space once more belonging to its keepers until the next arrival knocks at the door. The fire burns low but steady its heat, keeping the chill just far enough at bay. The smells of bread and ale are fading, replaced by the faint aroma of damp wood drying in the warmth. You notice how the sounds carry differently in the empty room. The scrape of the broom seems sharper. The faint clink of a spoon in the kitchen has a longer echo. Even the gentle thud of the innkeeper setting a barrel tap into place seems more deliberate, as though every sound is allowed to linger a little before fading. The innkeeper passes by your table, offering a brief nod. His expression is calm, almost unreadable, but there is something in his eyes that suggests he's already thinking ahead to the evening. The fire to be fed, the ale to be drawn, the bread to be set for those yet unseen. He moves on without breaking his rhythm, disappearing into the small storeroom at the back. Outside, the yard settles into its own quiet order. The horses, no longer shifting in harness, stand tethered in the sun-tails, flicking lazily at the occasional fly. A cart leans against the fence, its bed damp from the night's rain, but drying quickly in the strengthening light. The road beyond shows no sign of travelers. For now, though you know that could change with the arrival of a single rider cresting the hill. The serving woman returns to the common room carrying a small jug of water and a cloth. She moves to the tables, wiping them down in broad, practiced strokes. At the end of each pass, she wrings the cloth into a bucket, the water darkening with the day's first traces of work. She hums again under her breath, the same slow tune you heard the evening before, as steady as the sweep of her arm. In one corner, the boy kneels beside a crate of firewood, sorting through the pieces with small, decisive motions. He sets the thicker logs aside for the evening's long burn, placing the smaller kindling in a neat pile near the hearth. Every so often he glances toward the doorway, perhaps hoping for a visitor to break the quiet. The morning light climbs higher, casting broader patches across the floorboards. In those bright shapes, the grain of the wood stands out sharply, the scars and knots, the long worn paths that countless boots have taken. The inn has kept them all, each mark another layer in its quiet record of days and nights gone by. This is the inn's in-between time, not asleep, not yet fully awake to the demands of another evening. The hours stretch gently, filled with small, steady labors that will prepare it for the next wave of road-worn faces, wet cloaks, and tired eyes seeking firelight. For now it holds itself in calm readiness, the air easy, the work unhurried, the day just beginning to unfold. The hours pass without urgency. The morning's hush holds until the light through the shutters sharpens into something warmer, a softer gold that catches in the dust, motes drifting lazily across the room. The fire in the hearth has burned down to a low, glowing heart, its heat gentle rather than insistent. The inn's work has become the small, steady business of keeping itself ready. It is near midday when the first visitor appears. The sound of hooves on the damp road reaches you before the sight of them, a slow, measured clop, the kind of pace that suggests neither hurry nor weariness. The serving woman glances toward the door at the same moment you do. A moment later, the latch lifts and the door swings inward. A lone rider stands framed in the daylight, a travel-stained cloak draped over narrow shoulders. The hood is pulled back to reveal a weather-worn face flushed slightly from the ride. They step inside, closing the door behind them, and pause in that small moment of adjustment when eyes must shift from sunlight to dim firelight. The innkeeper greets them with a brief nod, already moving to draw a mug of ale from the barrel. The visitor crosses to a bench by the hearth, pulling off leather gloves stiffened by the damp. They lay them flat on the table, lean their riding stick against the wall, and accept the mug with quiet thanks. The first sip leaves their shoulders slightly looser, the day's road settling behind them in a way that only warmth and drink can manage. The boy hurries forward with a small loaf and a wedge of cheese, setting it down without ceremony. The bread is still faintly warm from the kitchen hearth. The cheese smells faintly of the smokehouse. The rider tears into both with the kind of single-minded attention only hunger provides. Eating slowly but without pause. Outside, the road is still mostly empty. A light breeze stirs the last damp from the hedges, sending faint scents of earth and leaf drifting in through the open shutters. Somewhere in the near distance, a cart rattles briefly over uneven stones, its sound passing quickly and leaving the air still again. Before long, another pair of visitors arrives, merchants by their dress, their boots muddy from walking rather than riding. They carry small bundles wrapped in oilcloth and speak to each other in low tones as they enter. The innkeeper gestures them toward a table and draws ale without needing to be asked. The serving woman appears from the kitchen with a trencher piled high with pottage, barley, carrot, onion, and a few pieces of pork floating among the root vegetables. The merchants waste no time, their spoons moving in slow but steady rhythm. The common room begins to take on a different shape now, the stillness of the morning, stretched just enough to make room for voices. They are not the loud, overlapping conversations of an evening crowd. These are softer, more contained, the kind of exchanges that pass between strangers who may or may not cross paths again. The scrape of a spoon against a wooden bowl, the faint creak of a bench shifting under weight, the rustle of a cloak laid over a chair, each sound settles comfortably into the room. The innkeeper moves with that same quiet assurance, refilling mugs, checking the fire, making sure the table nearest the door is wiped clean for anyone who might step in next. Now and then he steps to the doorway and glances down the road, gauging the day's pace. He doesn't linger just long enough to feel the air, note the direction of the wind, and return to his place behind the counter. The serving woman clears the empty breadboard from the lone rider's table, replacing it with a small plate of dried apples. She sets them down with a faint smile, the sort given when words are not needed. The rider thanks her quietly, their voice low enough to blend with the background murmur. In the yard beyond the open shutters, a small group of sparrows flits between the fence posts, pecking at the damp straw. Their sudden bursts of movement are the liveliest thing in sight, and their quiet chittering weaves faintly into the sounds of the room. The boy reappears with a jug of water and begins to refill the clay mugs at the empty tables. His movements are more deliberate now, his earlier morning bursts of energy softened into a steadier rhythm. He works in small circles, pausing now and then to glance toward the door, as though expecting someone familiar to arrive. The midday passes this way, a slow, unhurried gathering of travelers who appear one or two at a time, pausing here for warmth and food before returning to their roads. The inn never quite fills, but it no longer feels empty either. Each arrival leaves a small trace in the air, An impression of footsteps, the faint warmth of a recently vacated bench, the smell of a cloak drying by the hearth. This is the inn's softer face, the one it shows in the daylight hours when the road's traffic moves at a gentler pace. It welcomes without pressing offers, without ceremony, and lets the hours pass like the slow turning of a page. By the time the light shifts again toward afternoon, the memory of the morning's hush has thinned, replaced by a warm hum that promises the evening will come in its own time, bringing with it the familiar rise of voices and firelight once more. The sun tilts further west, its light softening into a warmer, lower hue. Through the open shutters, you can see how the long shadows stretch across the yard, draping themselves over the fence posts and pooling in the hollows between stones. The air carries a faint chill again, not the damp bite of dawn, but the cool that reminds you the day is beginning to fold in on itself. The midday visitors have gone back to the road. Their mugs and bowls have been cleared away, the benches pushed back neatly under the trestle tables. For a short while, the common room rests in a rare pause, the kind that feels almost like the inn drawing a slow, measured breath before the next round of arrivals. Outside, the yard has its own small stirrings. The boy moves a stack of split logs from the lean-to to the hearthside, each armload leaving a faint trace of sawdust on the flagstones. Chickens scratch at the damp earth near the fence, their small clucks mingling with the sharper cry of a crow somewhere beyond the hedge. In the distance, a wagon creaks along the road, its sound rising and fading as it passes without stopping. The innkeeper steps to the doorway and leans briefly against the frame, his gaze taking in the road, the yard, the slow-moving clouds overhead. He lingers longer than he did in the morning, as if weighing the feel of the day against the work yet to be done. When he turns back inside, he moves with a certain quiet readiness, the way someone does when they know the busier hours are not far off. The serving woman appears from the kitchen with a large clay jug balanced on one hip and a cloth in the other hand. She sets the jug down on the counter and begins wiping the tables in slow, deliberate strokes, working from one end of the room to the other. When she reaches the hearth, she stoops to gather the sweep of ash scattered on the hearthstone, adding it to the bucket at her side. The fire is rekindled with fresh logs. At first they smolder, giving off a faint hiss as pockets of moisture in the wood meet the heat. Then, with a low crackle, the flames catch, curling upward in small, lively tongues. The room brightens, almost imperceptibly, the orange glow finding its way into the darker corners and painting the ceiling beams with fresh light. Not long after the first of the afternoon, travelers arrive. A pair of riders dismount in the yard, their cloaks showing the dust of long roads rather than the sheen of morning rain. They tie their horses to the rail and step inside, the smell of leather and cold air following them. The innkeeper greets them with the same steady courtesy he offers everyone, gesturing them toward a table as the serving woman moves to fetch mugs. Behind them comes a small family on foot, a man with a pack slung over one shoulder, a woman carrying a bundle of cloth, and a boy of about 10 clutching a wooden whistle. They move slowly, the man pausing to push the door open wide enough for them all to pass. The warmth inside draws a faint smile from the woman who finds a seat near the hearth, while the boy's eyes roam the room with curious interest. The common room begins to fill again, not with the sharp swell of evening noise, but with the gradual layering of footsteps, low voices, the scrape of benches, the faint clink of mugs being set on tables. A soft hum builds under these sounds, the kind that makes the air feel warmer even before the fire has fully caught its rhythm. Outside, the light continues to deepen. The last of the day's gold spills across the road, catching in the puddles left from the night's rain. Beyond the hedge, the sky begins to pale toward its evening shades, though the first true darkness is still some way off. The serving woman moves easily among the tables, setting down trenchers of bread ladles of thick stew and small dishes of pickled vegetables. Her pace is brisker now, her expression focused, but not unkind. She knows these hours, knows how to weave between guests, how to sense when a bench will need shifting, or when a table is ready for refilling. The innkeeper, meanwhile, works the bar with quiet precision. He pours ale into mugs, slides them down the counter to waiting hands, and measures out coins into his palm without once breaking the slow rhythm of his work. His eyes move constantly, noting arrivals, marking empty seats, gauging the readiness of the room for the hours ahead. You watch it all from your seat near the hearth, feeling the shift in the air as the day tilts toward evening. The fire's warmth grows stronger now, its light reaching out into the deepening corners. The hum of voices wraps itself around the crackle of the logs. Outside, the road still runs on into the distance, but the inn has begun to draw the night's travelers into its orbit once again. Soon the easy murmur will grow into the fuller voice of evening, the songs, the louder laughter, the sharper smells of food and drink, but for now the inn rests in the threshold between day and night, holding both in a delicate balance. The balance tips almost without you noticing. One moment the room still holds the soft murmur of late afternoon. The next, it has filled into something richer, warmer, more solid. The door opens and closes in steady rhythm now, each arrival carrying with them a small burst of cool air and the faint scents of road horse or damp earth. Cloaks are hung over benches, packs laid down in corners, boots left to dry by the hearth. The fire has found its stride. Flames stand high and bright, sending a constant ripple of orange light across the low beams. Shadows dance on the walls and retreat into the corners, only to leap forward again when the flames flare. The heat settles deeply into the room, drawing the chill from your bones the way it did on the evening before. Tables fill quickly. Merchants unpack small bundles to show to curious eyes the folds of cloth and glint of trinkets catching the firelight. Wagoners speak in low, deliberate tones about the next day's routes, marking distances with gestures in the air. A pilgrim sits quietly near the hearth, hands folded over a cup of small ale, gaze resting somewhere far beyond the walls. The serving woman moves in practiced loops between kitchen bar and tables, always seeming to arrive just before a mug empties or a loaf runs low. Her steps are swift but sure, weaving between guests, without ever brushing a cloak or bumping a bench. Now and then she rests a hand lightly on a table's edge to steady herself as she bends to set down a steaming trencher. From the kitchen comes the rich scent of roasting meat, mingled with the sharper tang of onions and herbs. The smell weaves itself into the air, settling low and warm around the guests. A pot of pottage bubbles gently in the hearth's side, heat thick enough to stand a spoon in. Bread is sliced, its crust crackling softly under the knife, the dense crumb still holding the faint warmth of the bake. The innkeeper's voice joins the flow now and then, not loud, but carrying easily when needed. He calls for fresh ale to be drawn, exchanges a brief joke with a familiar guest, or offers a quiet word to those newly arrived. His presence holds the room steady. It moves around him like a slow current around a rock in the stream. Somewhere in the corner, the minstrels have taken their place again, lutes resting across their knees. They test a few soft notes at first, letting them stretch and bend in the warm air. Then a slow tune begins, unhurried but sure, the kind of melody that draws heads to turn without demanding it. Conversations lean into its rhythm, the words falling into place between the gentle measures of the music. As the evening deepens, laughter grows warmer. Stories are told, some true, some stretched into better shapes for telling. Hands gesture widely in the glow, mugs raised in mid-sentence, bread broken and shared across benches. The voices of the guests mingle with the music and the crackle of the fire until they become one sound, the living hum of the inn in its full evening heart. Outside, the road fades into shadow. The world beyond the walls is now a place of darkness and distant sounds, the muffled tread of a passing cart, the sigh of the wind in the hedge. Here inside, the night is contained, held safe between the thick timber beams and the steady rhythm of food, drink, and company. A group near the door bursts briefly into song, their voices rising above the rest, before slipping back into laughter. The pilgrim by the hearth closes his eyes, the corners of his mouth easing upward just slightly. The merchants return to their quiet bargaining coins, sliding across the table with the soft clink of metal on wood. The boy moves quietly through the room, now carrying empty mugs back to the bar, stacking them neatly for washing later. His eyes follow the minstrels with the kind of focus that suggests he's memorizing the chords for himself. The innkeeper gives him a brief, approving nod as he passes. The hours stretch warmly forward. The fire burns steady, the music winds on the air, hums with the kind of contentment that only comes when the road is far away and the night is yours to spend here. You feel it settling over you again, as it did before, this sense that the inn is not just shelter, but a whole small world gathered into a single breathing space. And outside, the dark deepens without pressing in. Because within these walls, the evening belongs entirely to those here, to the fire, the music, the company, and the quiet promise that the night will end as it began, with warmth, food, and the sense of being exactly where you need to be. The fire has burned down to a low, steady glow. Flames no longer leap or crackle. They curl in slow, lazy arcs around the blackened logs, the embers beneath them pulsing softly like the last heartbeat of the day. The music in the corner has quieted to a few gentle notes, the kind that fade almost as soon as they're born. Conversations have thinned to murmurs or vanished entirely, leaving only the low rustle of movement and the faint clink of a mug being set aside. The air feels warmer now, but softer, as if the heat itself has learned to whisper. You shift slightly on the bench, feeling the wood smooth under your palm, and let your gaze drift toward the dim corners of the room. Shadows have grown long and still stretching across the floor in patient lines that point toward the hearth. Upstairs, a door closes with a gentle click, and the creak of footsteps moves slowly away. The boy slips out from behind the bar, carrying a small bundle of kindling for the morning fire. The innkeeper watches him go, then turns to bank the embers with a practiced hand, coaxing them into a safe bed for the night. The scent of wood smoke lingers in the air, wrapping itself around you like a familiar blanket. Outside, the world is fully dark. The road lies empty, the yard silent, except for the faint sigh of the wind through the hedge. Within these walls, though, time feels suspended, neither night nor day, just a gentle pause. You feel your own breath slow to match it, each inhale deeper, each exhale softer. Somewhere upstairs, your bed waits its coarse blanket and uneven rope frame ready to hold you in the quiet that only comes when the world has gone still.